Brilliant. I think over to you, Duncan, and if there's a couple more joining in a moment, I'll let them in.
Okay, thanks, James. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Please note, everyone is on mute for the moment to avoid any audio delays. If you do have a question, please feel free to write it in the chat as we go through. There will also be a Q&A session for questions at the end of the presentation, where you will be able to unmute and ask questions. The presentation today is being recorded for training and will be edited for marketing purposes. First of all, on behalf of Inside Education, I would like to extend our warm welcome to Gavano School in Italy, Oxbridge Tutorial College in Nigeria, and our wonderful partners in the UK, Europe, Argentina, and East Asia. We are also delighted to have our new and existing clients, new partners, and those of you who joined us via Eventbrite to find out more about academic mentoring here at Inside Education. My name is Duncan Lee, and I am IE's Head of Marketing. At Inside Education, James, would you mind popping up the presentation so everyone can see the second slide?
Sure.
At Inside Education, our flagship programs are our online Oxbridge mentoring courses as part of our core services on university admissions. We also provide preparation for UK boarding school admissions, private tutoring for GCSE, A-level and IB, career mentoring, because we believe supporting students does not stop when they get to university. We continue supporting them in securing their dream jobs after university. Teacher training, we focus on helping teachers write excellent UCAS teacher references for student university admissions. With that said, we're very fortunate today to have as our panelists, IE's Managing Director Joyce, Head of Accounts and University Counseling Mark, Head of Business and Innovation James, Business Manager Osman, and Project Officer Harriet and Gleb. Among our panel, we have a broad representation from top UK universities, including Oxford, Cambridge, UCL, Warwick, and Edinburgh. As for myself, I was also educated in mainland China, Hong Kong, US, and the UK. I enjoy sharing my experience with students and helping them understand cultural differences and global citizenship. Without further ado, I will quickly walk you through our agenda for today and then pass the floor to James. We will start with James talking to us about what academic mentoring is, and then we will demonstrate some of our learning frameworks that we teach our students to produce top-level answers in both exams and admission interviews. And then James will introduce us to our exciting OSP program in 2021, and then we will wrap up our presentation with a Q&A session. With that said, over to you, James.
Thanks so much, Duncan. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about who we are at Insight Education and academic mentoring, as Duncan said. We were founded in 2006, back when Joyce first was doing this alongside a full-time job in the civil service. And then since then, Insight Education has grown and grown, always specialising in online tutoring and in making fun, interactive courses. You can see from our vision here that we are strong supporters of social enterprise. What I mean by that is our sole purpose for existing is to maximize the capabilities and aspirations of every single one of you guys that join us on our programs. And we do that through promoting some of the values that you can see on screen. We really believe in giving you skills that last a lifetime. So, how do we go about doing that? We believe in going beyond the grade here at Insight Education. So we don't just want to get you a place at your dream educational institution, whether that be a boarding school, university, or later down the line. What we believe is in helping you to succeed there as well, teaching each and every one of you the skills for long-term success. And we've done that through certain traits that we emphasize. And you can see 3 of those traits on screen now: critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and independent learning. We really believe these provide a unique way of approaching education through the mentoring lens. How do we go about doing that? Well, our approach is grounded in pedagogy, the science of learning and teaching. Our processes start with you guys wanting to learn. That's what we have to inspire, because how on earth is anyone meant to learn anything if you don't want to and you don't believe in it? That's certainly a lesson I took from my school days. We then adopt a practical approach, because the best way to learn isn't with someone else speaking at you for an hour. You need to actively do, try, and develop all of these techniques. And experimenting is the best way to do that in the guided, supported environment of a mentoring session. Our mentors only come in at that feedback stage to refine, provide suggestions, and tailor that approach. And then there's the undervalued stage of digesting, that ability to reflect on what you've learned, enhance it, and then improve it for the next time. That completes this virtuous learning cycle that Philip Race discussed, and it's at the corner of every single one of our programs. We're aware that in lots of countries around the world, you're taught formulas at GCSE, at A level, and they lead you to success. And one of the most common questions we've been asked, specialising in Oxbridge, is there a formula that gets you into Oxbridge? Well, we would say that it boils down to these 8 traits that we created. We spoke to our mentors, our former students, our current students, and our management team, and tried to find personality features that united everyone. And these were the 8 that we created. We focus on teaching these skills just as much as a tutoring company might focus on teaching you a subject. And we really believe these lead to long-term success. So whether you're going for that boarding school or that university, everything is grounded in teaching you long-term skills. Now, that's all I'm going to say on this slide for the moment, because I'm going to come back to it a little later when I talk about the OSP. And here you can see that learning by doing approach, embodying every single part of our programs, whether that be group discussions, like the one I was fortunate enough to lead on the top left with students who came over in the summer in slightly sunnier times when COVID didn't restrict that, all the way through to STEAM competitions, to careers workshops. And I think students at Garfano might be able to recognize some of their younger classmates involved in one of our presentations a couple of years ago, as well as those at OTC, which we've specially featured here today. Our flagship service is, of course, revolving around university admissions. And you can see here the top UK Russell groups that we have prepared students for through our programs. Now you can see that 5 universities here are highlighted in blue. Known to the G5 by some, these also represent universities that consistently rank in the top 20 global universities. And while we talk about academic and Oxbridge mentoring, what I want to emphasize is these are the skills that those universities apply that we teach. They work just as well for all of these universities and indeed universities worldwide. And that's what we prioritize on our programs. Those programs look a little something like this. Again, we will be able to come back to this more in a second, but my golden rule, if you're slightly confused by an overload of acronyms, is anything with an S is a group-based program, and anything with an M is an individual-based program. And for the best chance of success, I know everyone says it, but it really is true, we recommend starting early. So you can see that we recommend the ideal place to start is that final year of IGCSE. If you're slightly older than that, don't panic. Lots of students join us at AS and IB level and still meet with much success, but we do emphasize starting early. So the structure of those programs is something that was developed right back by Joyce in 2006. So I'm going to hand over to her to talk a little bit about those programs and how they were created. Over to you, Joyce.
Thank you, James, for that very clear introduction. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the Oxbridge method. What is it? Well, the Oxbridge method can just be thought of as Oxford and Cambridge style teaching and learning, but at IGCSE, A-level and IB. And this method stemmed from, I guess, two questions that I was grappling with when I graduated from Oxford. So I went up to read Oxford history at Worcester College. So one question was, why was I the only successful student in my year group who secured a place at Oxbridge? And this is despite not receiving after school preparation classes that my peers did at the time, because I decided to apply very late, very last minute. So the question was, how could I replicate what I was doing right and inspire others in my footsteps? The second question was, why are A-levels and IB studies simply not enough on their own to prepare a student for Oxbridge entrance tests and university, and also life at top universities in general? So really, the Oxbridge mentoring programme was my solution to these two questions. So what does it entail? Well, we provide strategic advice on courses, universities and colleges based on motivation. And that's very different to based on where you want to be in life or career. First and foremost, we base it solely on motivation. The second is that we provide mock interviews so that students have a safe space to practice how to answer interview questions. We provide reading that's beyond A-level and IB concepts, and really these structured frameworks that we teach for answering questions and learning in more efficient ways, and also reflecting and learning from reflecting, because I don't think that's done enough in schools. All of this is very useful, especially when students come to write their personal statements for university admissions, and not just for the UK universities, but for anywhere around the world. Thanks, James. So one of the frameworks that we teach is a real technique. Time and again, humanities students who come onto our programs testify that they found this very useful. Harriet and Osman will be demonstrating this later, but in essence, what it is that in order to keep your answer real, you have to incorporate evidence of research. So that could be TV documentaries, radio documentaries, not just reading, public lectures that you've been to. E for enthusiasm. So some students are visibly enthusiastic, others are less so, but really the sign of an enthusiast is someone who's able to recall key details and their thoughts and feelings in relation to that. A for analysis and L for lateral thinking. And really the A and L can be broken down further into political, economic, social and cultural factors. So I'll leave it there because there's going to be a demonstration. Let's go on to the next slide, please. So if you're a mathematician or scientist, we also have a problem-solving technique called TIPS. Gleb will be demonstrating this soon, but what it is, in essence, is that T stands for tools, I for information, P for proposal, and S for state. And this is a framework that can be used by students in the classroom as well as in their eventual interviews at Oxford and Cambridge. By students consistently working through the letters of the acronym, they will consistently achieve a high level answer. So tools being what it says there, what mathematical tools at GCSE or A level could you use to answer the question? Information relates to, well, what sort of advice and tips or hints are given in the question itself to help me solve the problem? P is very important because when you propose something, you're proposing verbally. So the point is that you're thinking aloud your thought process. And that's so important because if you get stuck, people can come in and help you and redirect you and state the answer at the end. We've had students in the past who've not engaged in class. They've learnt this framework, they've started to use it when their school teacher asks questions. They've received praise and it's encouraged them to engage further. And by visibly doing that, the teacher was able to write some really good things about them in their teacher reference. So we encourage all our students to do the same. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Mark. He's been doing a lot of UCAS recently.
Putting myself on. Great. Yeah, it's the time of year, and very often we get short notice for people panicking. What am I going to do? What am I going to write, etc. So my name's Mark. Yeah, I'm head of university counselling here at Insight Education. So UCAS brainstorming and helping students, that involves helping students refine their thoughts, and it's one of my many rewarding activities. And it's wonderful because most students who come our way have no idea how to start writing a personal statement. Okay. But in one session with us, they can come out understanding exactly what to write. And we break it down into 6 paragraphs with questions on them. And we teach them to understand what being analytical really means. Now, I normally, to do this, have to ask why at least 3 to 5 times before we reach the true answer. But I get it out of them. And now our UCAS method is very simple. It ensures that students, 1, tell their personal academic story, and 2, they keep focused on being able to express their motivation and how to be likable, which is everything to do with how they express themselves. And 3, to mention their X factor. What stands them out from the crowd in a nuanced way? In the refinement process, I asked students how they would shorten their sentence and improve their expression in their own work before offering my own thought. Now, recently, I've had the pleasure of dealing with a Norwegian student. He came to us just over 3 weeks ago. He was aiming for politics and international relations at London School of Economics. He was at that time at military academy, and I ended up working also with his career counsellor and his social studies teacher at his previous high school to help them craft also the best possible teacher reference. So this illustrates the fact that we don't just work on students' personal statements, but we can also help schools as well, because the teacher reference is also crucial. And I've been working with schools in Africa, the Middle East, East Asia, to help their students achieve the best possible chance of success in UK university admissions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mark. So hopefully, having listened to Joyce and Mark, you really do believe that what we do works. But I'm aware that you might want some statistics to back that up. So here they are. We are very proud to see our programmes in 1 year doing what top schools such as Eton in the UK do in 7, with a success rate that is double the national average. You can see here that Oxbridge Interviews, we held a 49% success rate in 2018, which rose to 53% in 2019. It's a bit too early to tell with those who have heard fantastic news back this year, but that success rate looks to be between 40 and 60%. So again, these methods really do work and stand for long-term success. Who's going to teach you? Well, here's our combination of mentors. And you can see here that we have some slightly more recent graduates, as well as senior educational professionals. Let me talk to you very briefly about that difference. We have recent graduates who act like an elder brother or sister, who are there to guide you through the process and provide their tips as a mentor, the tricks that helped them to succeed that just aren't commonly available. We combine that with the expertise of senior educational professionals, such as examiners and heads of department at their school. So you approach each and every task from two sides, the one marking it and those who succeeded in the past. And you can hear that it worked for some of our students in the past, but in particular, I want to draw your attention to the case of Jenny. Jenny joined us thinking she wanted to study economics at Cambridge, but by working with a personal development mentor that we offer, we found that actually the LSE course more suited her interests and her skill set than the Cambridge course. So that's where she made the application. And I think that really does go to show how we're interested in the potential of our students and what suits them, rather than just pushing them towards one set destination. We will always defend the corner of our students in order to make sure that they go to the best place for them. And it might not be the same as the one they initially thought. So at that point, I'm going to pause and hand over to some of our previous students and team members who are joining us here today. And they're going to demonstrate the frameworks that they used with success and which I'm delighted to say they are still using now. And the first of those is Harriet. Harriet, over to you.
Thanks, James. So yeah, as Joyce mentioned earlier, we like to use frameworks to outline our answers at Insight Education. And this is something I've been using since my time on the programme, but also now studying history at UCL. So I think it would be good to talk you through a real life Oxbridge interview question example using our framework. So the question that I want to answer is, why are different state governments dealing with the pandemic in different ways? So I'm going to start by talking about research and enthusiasm. So Max Weber, who students will often come across at social science, GCSE and A-levels, defines a state as a compulsory political organisation with a centralised government that maintains a monopoly of the legitimate use of force within a certain territory. Now I need to move on to analysis and lateral thinking to show what that actually means. So therefore, it follows that each state government will act in accordance with their own interests. This poses a separate question on why these interests don't match up. This can be explained using the PESC model. So politically, countries can be opposite ends of the political spectrum. For example, New Zealand currently have their most left-wing government since the 1970s and have dealt with the pandemic relatively differently to the UK, who currently have a right-wing government. Additionally, the political constitutions of countries like Sweden and Japan have blocked them from implementing stringent intervention during the pandemic. We can then move on to economics. So economically, different countries have also implemented different levels of economic support, with the UK setting up the furlough scheme. Additionally, the US is in a transition stage where it's changing majority party, and therefore economic support is in the process of increasing, showing that the political often affects the economic. Now I want to move on to social factors and ask for some of your help in this. So social factors are things such as age and location. And if you can, I would like people to put in the chat some things that have affected their country in social policy, and I will come back to a few at the end. I'd also like to give some of my own examples. So socially, people have had different attitudes to the implementation of coronavirus measures. This has been seen within states as well as across them, with the UK even implementing localised lockdowns due to higher rates in certain areas. Finally, I can move on to culturally. Countries have also prioritised their arts and cultures industries differently. For example, the UK government has been criticised for encouraging people in this industry to consider retraining, whereas Germany have placed higher priority on this industry by pledging €1 billion into a fund for it. However, they've still been criticised by several culture figureheads who says it's not enough to support the 1.7 million people in the industry. On another spin, in Portugal and China, you can still eat out due to the virus situations, which is a big part of their consumer industry which continues to run. If I was then using this answer in an interview question or even in a written essay, I would then conclude by saying, overall, states are reacting differently, not because they don't have the same end goal to eradicate the virus, but because the situations of origin differed, and therefore so did their levels of prioritisation. And that framework is something that has helped me structure my answer and is something I use to this day in my uni work and also in interviews.
Thanks, Harriet. I'm going to hand straight over to Osman, who's going to talk to you a little bit about another framework called DISC-Perel.
Great, thank you, James. So Yeah, much like Harriet, I'm studying history, but I'm in my second year at Warwick University. And at school, you're taught kind of the Peel framework for answering essays, you know, point, evidence, explanation, link. But here we have the disc-Forel method, which you can see on the slide. And this really emphasizes kind of how you approach an essay question using kind of our framework. And I'm now going to talk you through an example question using this. So the question we have up, you can see, is, are pandemics deadlier than wars? Now, before we actually start answering this question, we're going to go through the disc section, which deals with the introduction to an essay. So what we do first is look at the title and see how we can attack the title. For example, how do we define the word deadly? It's quite a broad term. There's no one single definition of it. But does the word also create a negative false dichotomy? Is it actually right to compare pandemics with wars? I mean, they are both kind of very bad for human populations. So how can we say that one's worse than the other? And going into more detail, what metrics can we use to measure deadliness? Do we focus on death rates or casualty numbers, or are we going to look at a wider economic impact? And we also have to consider the period of time we look at. In addition to that, we also have to look at which wars we're going to cover and which pandemics within that framework. And as outlined, there are several approaches to tackle this question. You have a numerical approach where you can compare different statistics. There's the relativist game where you can compare one to the other based on their impacts. Or the philosophical approach, which is asking, is the question the right question to ask in this scenario? Or does it create a false comparison? And so then what you do is move on to the impact, the I of the disc. Why is this question important? Well, I'd say it's important because it gives us a new appreciation and understanding of the historical significance of the era we are living in. And that's really something important for the study of history. Then you'd move on to the scholars section, which looks at which scholars are essential to the debate. In particular, you draw out which specific events you'd want to focus on. And here I picked events because of their global nature, but also within a similar time frame, so it represents a fair point of comparison. So for example, this would mean you would include wars like World War I and World War II, and pandemics which have happened within the last 100 years, like the Spanish flu and the coronavirus. Because in one stage, it can be quite difficult to compare the casualties between, say, the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, the Ebola crisis of 10 years ago. They are completely different regions and time periods, so events need to be compared in a similar time frame for a fair analysis. And then I'd move on to the conclusion section of my argument, which is outlining my main argument. Overall, I would say I'd be taking a numerical approach for the purposes of this example, arguing that pandemics are deadlier than wars because they are naturally occurring and thus have caused more damage to human populations if you take a longer approach. Now we move on to the peril section, and you can do this for each of the PESC letters, which Harriet outlined: political, economic, social, and cultural. For the purposes of this example, I'm going to focus on the social impact. So first, I'd make the point of my argument. I'd say pandemics are deadlier than wars because they inflict higher casualty rates as they are naturally occurring events. I'd then bring in some evidence to back this up. So I'd say, while around 40 million people died during the First World War, the Spanish flu, which occurred in 1919, killed 50 million people. And the fact that these events both occurred within the same time period and therefore represent a fair point of comparison. But then what you do, and this is the unique stage, the rebuttal, you'd give some counter evidence. So you could say, someone attacking the argument could say that World War II killed 75 million people, while COVID-19 itself has currently only hit a global casualty rate of 2 million. But what I would do there is respond with another approach. I would say, comparing individual events is not helpful in this respect, as the historian John Lagarde has outlined how using an annals approach to history highlights the importance of taking into account the longue durée, as it's called in French, which is the longer time period to analyse the social impact of naturally occurring events. And because pandemics fit under this naturally occurring event category, compared to man-made wars, it makes more sense to tackle the question in this way, as pandemics have always been a feature of human society. What I then do is then bring it back to my evaluation, which really links it back to the question. So I would say, while comparing individual events may prove that a war is deadlier than a pandemic, taking a longer historical perspective actually reveals that pandemics have overall harmed human populations more greatly. However, you could then link back to the false dichotomy which the question itself poses and what I mentioned in the introduction. And you could say, it's very difficult to compare the casualties between wars and pandemics as they are both deadly and their impacts on human societies are both negative. So overall, that's how you'd approach a disc question. It's something I still use in my essays today at university. It's really helpful. And I'd say the most important feature here, and something that really differentiates the Oxbridge candidate, is attacking the question itself, not just accepting it for its face value, but actually looking at what assumptions it makes and how you can unpack this. So thank you very much. I'll hand back over to James.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Osman. It brings back memories. I remember, I hope Osman doesn't mind me saying, a couple of years ago when we were both sitting together going through this framework while he was still a student heading for university. And I'm glad to see he's still using it today. I'm going to hand straight over to Gleb, and I certainly didn't teach Gleb this one because anyone who knows about me knows that maths is probably not my strongest point at university level. Over to you, Gleb.
Right, thank you, James. So hello, everyone. I'm Gleb. I'll be taking you through the TIPS model today. So let's have a look at the question right at the top. Square center 3, 4, and one corner at 1, 5, and a multiple choice of where the other corner is. So immediately using TIPS tools, what do I see? So I'm giving 2 points. So I would probably use vectors for this question. And what information am I given? So I think it's very useful to draw it out right from the start. So let's say this is the center. Let's make this the corner. I just think it's so much easier to visualize when you use it. I'll just label that really quickly. All right, so as I said, I would probably use vectors for this one. So what's the easiest one that I can do right now? I could probably find this corner right here. So you see, I used proposal. I said, let's find the corner right there. So that's what I'm going to do. So a vector is basically a displacement from one point to the other. So let's say 3, 4 plus some vector x. No, actually, that's pretty boring. Let's use I and E for inside education. 3, 4 plus I equals 1, 5. Sorry. Right, immediately I can say I equals, in this situation, -2, 1. So how do we find the other corner? We say 3, 4 minus I, and that will give us the new location, 5, 3. Looking at the answers right now, I can see that that's not one of the options. So what do next? I suggest another proposal. I say now we're gonna look for another vector that can help us find these 2 points right here. So I say there's some other vector E, which is at 90 degrees to vector I. So how do I do it? I can draw it out again, saying if this is I, then E must be kind of at this angle. So immediately I can say that E is 1, 2 as a vector. And then we just do exactly the same process, 3, 4 plus or minus the new vector E, which gives us either 2, 2 or 4, 6. And immediately we can see that D has 2, 2, so that would be the right answer. So that's how you would do an interview question using TIPS. And the most important thing is that I talked all my about all my thoughts. So that's definitely a thing to take away. Thank you, James.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Gleb. And I know that when these questions were sprung upon the team members slightly earlier, and they could talk through these proposals, I think that's one of the key parts of the skills we teach here, that you can apply them in any context at any level. So thank you to Harriet, to Osman, and to Gleb for the demonstration there. I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about our new program that's launching, the Oxbridge Saturday School, the OSP Saturday School. It's online. It's interactive, and it really does have a great mix of fun with the educational learning incorporated into it. And I'm going to talk about a little of those words in more detail. What do we mean by international? Well, this course offers a unique opportunity insofar as students from all around the world, like today, whether you're in Italy, Nigeria, China, Argentina, somewhere completely different, all of you can come together into one classroom, a bit like 21st century pen pals, if it doesn't make me too old to use that word, pen pal. You'll all be there in the same room, learning together, bringing unique international perspectives to the course that we offer. And the modules are specifically designed around skills rather than subjects. So again, these will boost all of your performance in examinations, in university studies, but we're not looking at a set content that you might not know. Instead, we're basing it around our traits. And I'm going to share my screen now to show you some of those traits, as I promised earlier. So here you can see that we have divided 8 key traits and a list of effective and ineffective behaviors that arise from them. So in each session, we'll be looking for intellectual curiosity. Now, if I was preparing for university, someone would have always said, be intellectually curious to me. But if I'm being completely honest, I didn't have a clue what that meant, because it's a nice phrase, but what does it actually mean in practice? So what we've done is given you a specific list of tasks that you can tick off to see if you are actually being intellectually curious. And of course, with the help of our mentors, we'll let you get there as well. And you can compare it to your classmates as well. See what intellectual curiosity they're demonstrating. That's just one example. If I scroll down, you can see that we have a variety of 8 traits that, as we say, united every single one of our mentors, success stories, and management team on their university success. I'm going to leave those up as I talk about some of the other unique features of the session. On the OSP, this 24-hour online course that takes place on Saturdays, every single session has a student of the session, a certificate for a particular contribution that stood you out. That goes to one student each time. It could be for an inspired answer, a creative solution, critical thinking, or even asking a relevant question. And these are a really good thing that can boost a CV, boost something that stands out and makes it clear how you're going above and beyond those requirements that universities usually expect. We also have future leader sessions, because we think the best way to learn can also be interacting with fellow students. It's certainly one of the highlights of my job, being able to learn from you guys all over the world. I've been fortunate to run programs across 4 or 5 continents now, and every single time there's a different approach and a unique way of learning that you guys bring to it. So that shouldn't just be saved for people like me. You guys need to learn from each other as well. And what those future leader sessions are a chance for you to sit down together and interact without a mentor present to see if you would approach the problem from the same way, to learn from each other. At Oxbridge and at all top universities, the first is reserved for someone who considers multiple perspectives. Again, a very unhelpful term if you don't know what that means in practice. Well, multiple perspectives is meeting with international students and discussing things from different points of view. And we'll get you doing that Oxbridge level thinking at IGCSE, A level and IB. So that's the serious side. I also promised a bit of fun. So let me get up some of the fun in those activities as well. This campaign will be sent to you shortly after the presentation today so that you can have a look. So those are our 4 modules. But we also have 4 unique activities. So within those 4 modules, the 4th session each time involves something that's truly unique. For example, we hope that you all feel passionate about your country, whether that be Italy, China, Argentina. But we know that some of the other students in the room might not know so much about it. So you'll have to use those independent research skills, writing skills, and skills that you've learnt in that first module to convince everyone else of the benefits of your country, what it offers that's unique. And you can do that in any form you want. It could be a poem, it could be a rap, it could be a poster, it could be anything you like. We also have Day at the Museum, which for those of you who know the film Night at the Museum is my interpretation of an awful joke. So in this guided museum, tours meet with an escape room. So you're going to be able to look at objects and interactively solve your way through a museum, learning as you go along. I think it's the way that museums should be run personally, but I may be a bit biased. Then we have the debate. The debate at the end of the critical thinking module is a way that you guys can discuss amongst each other what professions are most key in the world. Is a farmer more important than a government official? Do we need the medics more than the engineers, as you can see here? Well, I want to hear your guys' answers to that through debate, through an international mix, where you get that chance to make your views heard. And then at the end of the course, everyone comes together in the spirit of UN global collaboration to solve a sustainable development goal. That might be combating pollution. It might be reducing inequality, but we want to see how you can work together to engineer a solution to a real world problem. Each of those 1.5-hour modules is delivered by a specialist. By specialist, again, we mean Oxbridge educated or senior educational professionals who are experts in that area. So while you do all 4 modules of the course, the experts come in to deliver the ones that they most know about. And of course, as an Insight Academy course, our online teaching courses, these will come at affordable prices. We're proud to offer some of the best rates for Oxbridge graduates and educational professionals within the sector there. So you can find out more information about that in the MailChimp that comes around later. But I'm really excited about these new courses. I hope you are too. I think it's the first course of its kind that really does connect students internationally in a way that's only become possible since the rise of Zoom, as I know that you're all capable to use.